Hi, good morning, and welcome to this session. It's the last day of the IGF. It's early in the morning, but still great to see you. I would like to welcome first the co-facilitators of this best practice forum, Bruna, and normally we have Teresa and Sheetal online. So I don't know, Bruna, if you want to say hi too?
Yeah, hi everyone, and welcome for being here this early. Well, hopefully last day, less rush until the end of this IGF, and also thanks Teresa and Sheetal for being online with us.
Yes. Hi, Sheetal. We didn't see each other for some time. So thank you for joining here and online to this session of the Policy Network on Internet Fragmentation. It is one of the intersessional activities of the IGF. It was started 3 years ago as an initiative taken by the community to raise awareness about fragmentation, to raise awareness about actions that may cause and discussions, issues that may cause internet fragmentation, and also with the purpose of facilitating the inclusive multi-stakeholder dialogue about fragmentation. Like I said, the policy network has been around for 3 years. The first 2 years we focused on exploring the field, and that led us to developing a framework to discuss internet fragmentation. If you can show the first slide, slide number 1. There you can see on the screen normally the PNIF framework we developed. Little explanation and background about this. When we started the discussion about internet fragmentation, automatically the first thing you do is to try to come up with a definition to say this is what we're talking about, this is what we want to discuss. But very quickly we discovered that focusing too much on defining what internet fragmentation is and what it is not brings us to endless discussions, endless yes, no, this you should talk about, this you cannot talk about. And that led us actually to develop a framework, a tool that is intended to facilitate the discussion, not really to define internet fragmentation, but to facilitate helping people that want to discuss fragmentation to indicate what they are talking about. And that tremendously helped us, I think, within the PNIF, but we also have seen it being picked up elsewhere to kind of guide the discussions. So what's in the framework? We identified 3 different baskets of internet fragmentation. When people talk about fragmentation, they either, we discovered, talked about or from a perspective of the user experience, or they were talking about internet governance and coordination, or they were talking about the technical layer, the internet technical layer. Let's start with the last one. When they talk about fragmentation of the internet technical layer, they're basically talking about the infrastructure that underpins the working of the internet, of the global internet. And fragmenting, internet fragmentation in that context would mean anything that can challenge the interoperability of the internet as we know it today. The second basket, internet fragmentation of internet governance and coordination, is actually linked in a way to discussions we have here at the Internet Governance Forum, but also discussions going on in other fora, decision fora, also at the other organizations, and pointing at the fact that if there are too many discussions going on about the internet, about the internet, and different fora in parallel without those institutions, organizations, and platforms talk to each other, this might lead, or this might be a kind of fragmenting the internet. The last basket is, or on top, is internet fragmentation from the user perspective, is basically the idea, the idea of the internet is that if you connect to the internet, wherever you are on the network, wherever you are in the world, you can have or you have the same expectations. You expect that you can do the same, that you can connect to the same services, the same content. We all know that this is not the case today, that when two users, it can be somebody sitting here, somebody sitting on the other side of the world. It can as well be me going online, Bruna going online, trying to do the same and getting a different result. That is also a form of fragmentation from the user perspective. It is not said that all these forms of fragmentation are problematic. Some are not. So this is the basic framework. It helps us to, when there are discussions, that people can flag, well, we see ourselves in this or that basket. Very important is also to understand that there is a relation, there is a huge overlap between the baskets, and they also interact, influence each other. And that the third element of the framework, and that's what's the gray box outside the framework, is there are a lot of measures, technical, legal, policy decisions that may influence fragmentations in the three senses, in the three boxes. So we really wanted, although this is a framework, I say, we worked on and we showed already at the IGF last year, we discussed the year before, we keep repeating it, we keep showing it, because we notice that it really helps to facilitate the discussion. I think I would like to keep it there as an introduction and then move over to the session today. And Sheetal, or the co-facilitator, will take you through the plans for today, the plans for this year. And please, Sheetal, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Wim. It's great to see you all on stage. You look super fresh for the last day of the IGF and the first session in the morning. And I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and all the long sunshine days that I hear you get in that part of the world at this time of year. I'm calling in from London, and it's great to be here for this session because, as you've explained, Wim, we have come a long way, I think, with the framework, with the work of the policy network in supporting an understanding of internet fragmentation and a basis to work from on this issue. And so with this session, we wanted to launch the work of the policy network for the coming year and be able to use this as a platform for discussion, for inclusive dialogue on what is happening with regards to internet fragmentation, to strengthen the dialogue, to be able to use this space to continue to monitor trends and discuss developments and raise awareness of what is happening and really educate the community and ourselves so that we can act with awareness. And all of this grounded in a commitment that is in the Global Digital Compact, very specifically. You will know it, paragraph 29C, which commits to promoting international cooperation among all stakeholders to prevent, identify, and address risks of fragmentation of the internet in a timely manner. I think there's a slide 2, if I can ask the tech team to display it, when you had asked me to remember that, and I forgot. So if slide 2 is available, you can have that on the screen. Yes. But that just shows the specific commitment within the compact to promote international cooperation on this particular issue. It's very clear, it's there. It's also accompanied by paragraph D, which commits to refraining from internet shutdowns and connects this commitment around fragmentation to Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is all about promoting inclusive societies and peaceful institutions, which of course an open and secure internet, interoperable internet is so essential for. So we want to start, of course, at the beginning, which is going to lead me back to giving you the mic on the stage. It's always good to start at the beginning, where we want to ask what has actually been happening with regards to the status of this commitment, what international cooperation efforts have begun, are there any gaps, what can we bring to the table, where have we begun with regards to this commitment, and what can we do as a network and community to continue to monitor it. So back to you, and looking forward to the discussion and to hearing from all of you, both there in Norway and of course online. Thanks, Rem.
Thanks, Chital. We have a very interesting and diverse set of speakers for this session. Sorry for my voice, like last day. But I'll take a moment in introducing you all. We have Joyce by my side, Senior Advisor at Strategic Engagement at PNIF. We also have Naim, State Secretary in Montenegro. We have Michel Lambert, who I hope joins us very soon. He's the General Manager for Equality. We have Dhruv at the end of the table, let's say, the non-table, from the Internet Architecture Board, representing them here. And also dear colleague Marília Maciel, Director of Digital Trade and Economic Security at Diplo Foundation. As Chital was saying, I think we can start with an initial set of interventions about the GDC commitments, right? We had a very thorough discussion of the Global Digital Compact, what it would mean for society. Also, a lot of commitments from social media platforms into information integrity and spanning out across the board from many things around internet governance. And to be fair, it's somehow unfortunate that we're having a session just now with the co-facilitators for WSIS Plus 20, where a lot of implementations and suggestions for the new framework are also being suggested. But maybe I'll start with Marília, if that's okay, starting with our remote speakers. I think if you can start us off with just some ideas and comments on how does this commitment, could be shaped, and we know that there is still a lot of efforts being implemented in terms of mapping of the GDC commitment, but at some point, until now at least, we haven't heard much from the internet fragmentation bit, as we assume it's part of an ongoing mapping as well. So I'll pass the floor to you, Marília. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bruna. I trust you can hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Just let me know. Well, thanks to the organizers of the session for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. And since we don't have much time, let me just pick one angle of this discussion and explore it, and then make some suggestions based on the questions that were proposed to us that I think could be reflected in the upcoming report. Well, the drivers of fragmentation can be of different types, as we have discussed: technical, political, commercial. But one of the main elements that has traditionally strengthened fragmentation trends is the tension between the cross-border nature of the internet and our territorially grounded political and legal systems. But in the present geopolitical context of rising tensions, there is mounting pressure towards reinforcing territorialization. Borders are becoming ever more important, as we can see in several examples today, such as the application of unilateral tariffs on digital key products, such as semiconductors, the potential end of the moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions at the WTO, which will mean that we will pay more for films and music that will not be exempt from tariffs imposed at the border anymore, the adoption of investment screening mechanisms for inbound and outbound investment that touch upon investment on key digital sectors, including in developing countries. So there are these general ongoing trends. And when the GDPR was first introduced, the headlines talked about the return of the state to digital policy. But what is happening today is different from attempts to strengthen the authority of the state in order for it to protect individual rights and promote competition online. Today, I think particularly in developed countries, which are the front runners of digital technology, re-territorialization and digital sovereignty have been increasingly invoked to strengthen the state itself, especially when these expressions are associated with national security concerns and protectionist worldviews. So there's a growing entanglement between national security and economic security, and digital technologies cutting across both. So in this context, countries are usually pushing for a double strategy. On the one hand, they are exploiting existing digital interdependencies to achieve their geopolitical goals, while on the other hand, they are seeking autonomy for themselves in key digital areas, even if this means redefining networks of global production of goods and services. Because of this, I think it's very important that the network looks at how states are promoting fragmentation by acting upon dismantling, reorganizing the digital economy along geopolitical goals and along ideological fault lines, and how this might affect global access to technology, technology diffusion, including when it comes to hardware, software, data, algorithms, and model weights. So what I am proposing in practice, and maybe we can think about reflecting that in the report, is that first, we should add another dimension of our working notion of fragmentation, which would consider fragmentation in the global economy, while governments are acting upon markets and introducing elements of fragmentation. They do that by reducing previously agreed openness of digital markets and the openness of value chains that produce and distribute ICT goods and services, many times foreclosing these value chains to non-allies or to countries that are considered non-reliable, for example, and many of them are located in the global south. Secondly, I think it is important to broaden the scope of fragmentation in order to consider not only individual end user experience, but also the fragmentation that is affecting intermediary users, which can also be companies that employ ICT goods and services to produce their own products and services. Third, while we tweak the scope of our understanding of fragmentation, special attention should be given to developing countries and how this fragmentation could impact their access to technology and their access to investment as well in digital sectors. So what collaboration efforts have been put in place when it comes to this particular understanding of fragmentation? Not many that I'm aware of, so there's definitely a gap there, something that we can do. But some organizations have worked independently and have tried to map these effects. So the WTO, for example, was one of the first to ring alarm bells about fragmentation of global value chains. The Digital Policy Alert from the University of St. Gallen has introduced studies on fragmentation from a regulatory perspective and also from a tariff perspective. The OECD has recently produced studies on the need to find balance between free data flows and the existence of legal frameworks, and have economically quantified the sweet spot between both. But most important of all, I think we need to mobilize companies, because they're the ones who hold the main pieces of the puzzle to understand what's going on. And the Geneva Internet Platform has developed an initiative that fosters collaboration among companies when it comes to discussing responsible behavior in cyberspace. And this dialogue could serve as a blueprint to bring together companies from different digital sectors to discuss fragmentation. I think, to conclude, that the policy network is really well placed to convene multi-stakeholder discussion and to kickstart some very interesting projects with the end goal of the 2027 deadline. But the IGF itself has, by and large, refrained from discussing the issues related to the digital political economy. In fact, I think that the IGF has not really responded over the last 10 years to the significant migration of digital policy discussions, data flows, algorithms, privacy, AI, to digital trade negotiations and agreements, which are, by the way, not transparent, not accountable, not multi-stakeholder. So in itself, this migration is a fragmentation of internet governance. So perhaps there is an opportunity now for us to kill two birds with one stone and address the ongoing fragmentation of internet governance, digital governance, through discussions on fragmentation trends that we can see in the digital economy today. I think I'll stop here. Over to you, Bruna.
Thank you, Marilia, and thanks a lot for reminding us of this social-political tensions, right, that we see not just in policy making, but also throughout the venues and the forums. I do think that some aspects of it we try to bring into the fragmentation of coordination, but it's true, in fact, that we didn't really address the economic aspect of the whole discussion. So thanks a lot for reminding us of that. I'll bring the conversation to you, Naim, especially for the policy-making part, right? I always enjoy the prep meetings for these sessions because I think we always kind of dive into the debate before, but I do think both conversations will bridge very well, right? And just maybe to hear from you, looking at these commitments and looking at what the GDC has meant for the discussion on internet fragmentation, how do you think you could embed those commitments, and how do you think you could contribute from a government perspective into this debate? Thanks.
Thank you, and good morning all. It's great to be here and talk about this topic, and thanks to IGF and PNIF that is putting this topic on a talk. Also, thanks for the host country, Norway, for the hospitality. Fragmentation from this point of view, of governmental point of view. I know that we won't go too much on the technical details, but I have to focus on the political fragmentation and what a government can do to continue this commitment that you already mentioned, also commitments of GDC. So I will start and say how Montenegro works on this. So we don't have any fragmentations on internet, but of course we do some activities that they indirectly support evidencing the risks of fragmentations. So as a country who is running also to be part of EU, and as we're looking for single market that it's also included with the fragmentation, and I mean a common internet and all economic activities, we of course work on strategic plans that indirectly stops fragmentations through having same directives with the EU members. Not only EU, but we as a region of Western Balkans, we're trying to have the same digital strategies and all activities, starting also from the legal framework. So this is important, starting with the legal, and after that, of course, implementing that. For us, this is a very important topic. Unfortunately, not only in Montenegro, but even in other countries, we don't have legal something that will define fragmentation, stops this. And of course, all stakeholders. I always love to put in one table always about these important topics, even government organizations, but also universities, private sector, NGOs that can also give a huge effect to this and other topics, especially in part of digitalization, because this is a live system and changes a lot. And of course, representatives of groups that we cannot see too much. And those are youth and also representatives of regions from globally that they are not too much active on these topics. So we have to have all these elements at the same table and start working on the legal part to stop fragmentation. Also, I said that we did a lot on part of stopping fragmentation indirectly, but there are factors that can affect Montenegro and having some fragmentations. Not only Montenegro, it's the same way that can be also be active in other countries. So as mostly we know that 3 years ago in Montenegro we had a huge cyber attack, so this can also happen to we as a government stop and look our position and to save our information, government information, but also citizen information. So we have to start with some fragmentation, even if we are not on that side. So the second point that is a factor of opening the fragmentation is this that I already mentioned, the legal framework. And the third, of course, is that gap. Even in our region, Western Balkans, we did really a great job of connectivity to internet. So this also, that gap that is still there between parts in our country, especially rural parts, that they cannot catch too much of services, and connectivity to internet can help and brings indirectly and be a factor of fragmentation. But still, I think that starting from the positions that I am and all other persons working in the government should really start more and bring this topic to a higher level. So even from the legal and other activities. So I think that for the beginning would be this from my side, but still these activities, maybe I always say, even inside our country, when we wait for some results, maybe we don't get that as we wanted, that communication beside all actors and stakeholders. So that would be my point, that the communication, starting from the regions, then continent, then global, should really be direct and better communication. So maybe that would be how to improve these committees of GDC. That would be to make some roadmap, like to see the activities, what stakeholders are doing in this topic, and to have the common roadmap, but not just a roadmap that is written, but what really to be that all stakeholders should respect that and really work on achieving some results of stopping and of fragmentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that from what your intervention, I would maybe highlight this need for nearer commitments, right? And nearer for, not just nearer commitments, but a more aligned conversation of what fragmentation could mean, what states should be doing for that. The EU, as you were saying, has already a lot of initiatives in that sense, but there are some gaps, right, with the accessing states and also some regions of the continent as well that might be lacking or might not be as represented in this debate. But it's also a conversation for the rest of the world, right, and where we, as you were very well highlighting, we should include more and more voices. I will maybe bring it to another of our remote speakers, Michelle. I don't know if you can hear us, and if can you hear us well, and are you ready to speak? I'm not sure if you can unmute yourself, but if technical can help us, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for joining us, Michelle. You told us you would like to address the gaps, right? And the gaps specifically in fragmentation, and also knowing you're part of the SplinterCon community. We're all very keen to hear you speaking about the gaps on this conversation. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I was trying to open my camera, but it doesn't work. That's okay. At least we have the sound. So yes, thank you first for the invitation. I'll take just a few seconds to mention that I'm working for a group called Equality, the Canadian non-for-profit organization, and what we do, we develop open source technologies to support digital and community resilience, particularly in environments affected by censorship. So that's why we run the SplinterCon series, which bring together, researchers, developers, technologists, entrepreneurs, internet freedom advocates to, look at all the issues of fragmentation and find ways to go around. So that's such, we work directly with communities affected with network shutdown, filtering or target digital repression. And from our own perspective, there are at least two urgent and under-addressed gaps that demand immediate attention from our community. And we call the first one the political normalization of network control. It's a big word. Tools of censorship, surveillance, and fragmentation are no longer exceptional. They are becoming normalized instruments of governance. we are witnessing a global shift where controlling internet access is increasingly equated with sovereign state power. And this is not happening on the margin, it's happening at scale. And yet, even in this week of a high-level discussion on internet governance, censorship in shutdown felt a bit absent from the agenda. We discussed a lot about AI, but these emergencies seem a bit overlooked. For instance, I maybe have missed, but I've seen no formal discussion on Iran's recent full-scale shutdown affecting nearly 90 million people these last 10 days, as we were speaking. Very little serious engagement also with the ongoing restriction on Palestinians, restricted to 2G networks, digital ghettoization that has persisted for years. So this is just two examples, but they're not isolated events. They're part of a global pattern that will continue unless we act much more. Efforts like the Best Practice Forum on protecting core internet resource in context of conflict are welcome. I think it happened yesterday, and we intend to support them, but we must scale this effort, and this discussion should be more integrated, not only restricted to the policy network on internet fragmentation, but more included in the whole IGF process. If we want to leave no one behind, I mean, I heard that mantra a lot the whole week, we must apply even when government decide to shut down the internet for political purposes. In this context, the GDC, frame as it is, as a roadmap for right-based internet governance, risk legitimizing fragmentation. By enriching national sovereignty over domestic internet, it may inadvertently give cover to state-led shutdowns and repression. We must ensure that embedded human rights in digital governance is more than rhetorical. We need mechanisms to make it more difficult and even more costly for government to shut down the internet. If I may, I'd like to spend a few minutes just to look at the Iran's control fragmentation that we've seen this week. In the last 10 days, Iran has demonstrated a new level of sophistication in state-controlled network fragmentation. It's been like 4 times since 2009, and each time the regime learned. And now, after 16 years of trial and error, they can manage it successfully. Their national information network made sure that domestic accesses throughout the local services, bank, and internal messaging was working normally. But anything from outside to inside could not reach the servers. This is really full fragmentation in course. It's happening right now. There has been a few tools which managed to work, and without going into details of such tools, I can mention like Touche, a satellite-based file casting system, which managed to send a lot more content during those days. The Sino browser that we created is a peer-to-peer tool using BitTorrent, continued to distribute. Some matrix server work. Delta Chat is another one. But all these tools, are somehow a bit marginal in the context, and they need to be promoted before shutdown happens. So you need a lot of investment before, a lot of preparedness, and continuous innovation of these tools, because the reality is that shutdowns are becoming, the sensors are becoming more and more, performant. So the tool needs to be also updated all the time. And that takes me to my second gap here, and it really is the collapse of funding for internet freedom tools like this. It is no secret that the United States has been the primary funder of global internet freedom efforts since a few years now, contributing nearly 250 million annually. Now, the recent estimates suggest that up to 80% of this funding is being cut for this year and the year beyond. That will leave a massive gap at the worst possible time. Without immediate action from other governments, Canada, EU member states, and other allies, we risk losing essential infrastructure, tools, and networks that allow people to stay online and safe. In short term, that means We need to stabilize funding for critical tools before they disappear. We need to support local help desk, training hub, adapted version of censorships and conventional tools. We need mapping the real impact of the funding cuts to guide smart emergency level decision in the next 6 months. This is no moment for bureaucratic delays. And on the long term, really, we need to treat digital resilience as an essential infrastructure. We should support open, interoperable and sovereign alternatives to big tech. We need to mainstream encryption and privacy as fundamental rights. Digital shutdowns are no longer rare or extreme. They are part of the digital political playbook. If we fail to take them seriously, we will continue to see vulnerable communities cut off, silenced, and left behind. I'll stop here. Thanks to you.
Thanks, Michel. And thanks also for highlighting, I think it was the main point that came across to us when we were starting the framework mapping, right? That the tools, not the tools, but the abusive usage of internet shutdowns, first in the context of elections, and then in different contexts as well, as the ones you highlighted. So thanks a lot for bringing that into the conversation, and also the points on the current crisis in the development sector, right? I do believe that some of those things, they might affect in the longer run, the conversations we have. They do affect indeed the participation of civil society organizations and many other stakeholders here, but it's also important to highlight, I feel the obligation to highlight here as well, that we did have in the past years many ally governments to the digital freedoms agenda as well, right? And, we had spaces like the Freedom Online Coalition and many other, collectives or governmental coalitions that have been trying to counter-react to the usage of those tools, or trying to get across with a more concrete message. But thanks a lot for highlighting those points, and as a fellow civil society member, I appreciate the points made. Dhruv, I will bring the conversation to you to talk a bit more about technical fragmentation, right? I think it was the first point that was brought up to us when we started the PNIF, and we often heard there's no technical fragmentation. Why are you guys starting this work, right? What extra things or what new things are you going to discuss? So maybe if you had any thoughts or ideas on how we could work together on the GDC commitments and in making sure that the core aspects of the internet and the critical infrastructure of it is being well kept and the commitments around it. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be on the panel and bring out where the technical community is coming from. I'm on the Internet Architecture Board, which is part of our Internet Engineering Task Force. We do all the internet standards. Everything that we use, IP, DNS, email, HTTP, TLS, all the protocols that we see on the internet today were standardized at IGF. And these are global standards. They are implemented everywhere. The fear from the technical community that always comes is at the technical layer, as you were also highlighting in your PNIF framework, that we lead to interoperable solutions, where instead of an internet that is fully connected, where we can communicate from any part of the world to any other networks, we end up into regional or isolated networks that no longer work with each other. That can be also at the technical layer. The thing that we worry the most is in that cases, as standards organizations and ITF and others continue to develop new standards, and we add new extensions, we enable more privacy, we enable new things. There are sometimes regulations that comes in, which has an impact not just on the country where the regulation is coming from, but on the global internet. So there is a huge fear that we have, especially in the terms of digital sovereignty and governments focusing on having more regulation and control over the internet, but at the same time realizing that it's very hard to regulate something which is completely global. The internet is without borders, but the digital sovereignty is within borders. So we have to be always mindful We realize that the governments have a reason to regulate, they are doing something, but at the same time, internet is unique in its own way. So when they try to regulate anything, always keeping the fear of what is the bigger impact on the internet architecture, on the infrastructure, on the core technical layer, has to be always kept in the back of the mind. So when you asked what could be the next step, I hope that when these regulations comes in, there is a trust in the technical community that yes, we can rely on their expertise, that they have developed this, they have been running, there are real engineering and operational realities out there which needs to work with the regulations that is coming in. So if there could be more collaboration, more understanding from each other's point of view, that's the hope that the technical community would have and something that I personally also care for. Thank you.
Lovely, thanks. Thanks so much. And we did hear this many times across these years, right? The relevance of coordination, the relevance of like bringing the experts back into the room, right? Because it's really interesting that we come from all of these forums, IAB, IETF, ICANN, IGF on itself, and we preach about multi-stakeholderism all the time. But it's also true that when these fast policy-making decisions, they come to exist, we don't really have the time sometimes to include all the experts in the table because we're mainly focusing on giving efficient, quick answers to those problems and answers that might protect users, might make sure that the crisis, they don't go further. But indeed, it's one of the main points that we do at least have a point or more checkpoints on with the technical community, with academia, and many other experts in that sense, just so we know that we're doing the right thing and just so we know we can continue to do those types of measures and so on. And I'm going to bring it to you, Joyce, as well, because in the last 2 to 3 years, we also saw an even growing movement, right, for coordination of the technical community, especially in light of the said exclusion you guys had from the Global Digital Compact process, or the lack of acknowledgement, let's say it like that in a more diplomatic way. But maybe if you can just enlighten us on the coordination efforts that have been done recently, and also reminding everyone that you work for PNIF, so one of the core organizations in this space, together with the IAB and many other colleagues. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bruna, and also thank you to Wim, thank you to Sheetal for the very kind invitation to speak in this very important session. I'll first begin by talking about the Witness Elements paper. I think that has been on everybody's mind in the past week. And the Elements paper highlighted the risks of internet fragmentation as a core issue to be addressed. This shows how important and critical it is that we continue to look at this issue seriously. So I thank the PNIF for your wonderful work in this regard. You have helped us over the years to articulate what internet fragmentation is or could be. I think the real risk to internet fragmentation, and here I'm quoting, I believe it's one of the ICANN papers that they have published over the past few months, where they said the real risk to internet fragmentation is misalignment and the breakdown of coordination. And in this regard, APNIC, as part of the internet technical community and the larger multi-stakeholder internet governance community, has always supported strong and inclusive coordination and cooperation amongst all stakeholders. One way to mitigate fragmentation is continuous capacity building, both technical and non-technical. At APNIC, we are constantly building awareness around how the internet works, and sound technical network deployment ensures that there are no breakages in the functioning of the internet. If we look at the IGF itself is a capacity building, confidence building forum where the internet community can gather and talk exactly about these issues. The internet and the use of the internet are constantly evolving, and the IGF is the space for us to frame and set the agenda for discussions on fragmentation as the evolution takes place. I want to highlight that coordination is not often visible, but if fragmentation were to happen, it would take the invisible and make it visible. It would mean that the internet has points of failure. And so here I want to talk a bit about the current ICP2, or what we call the Internet Coordination Policy 2 review that is taking place. The ICANN Address Supporting Organization, or ASO, is reviewing this very important document. It's a fundamental document, which we now call the RIR governance document. This document talks about the establishment and the derecognition of RIRs. The original document was adopted in 2001, so it even predates the IGF. But it was instrumental in setting up the core internet organizations such as LACNIC and AFRINIC. Why did I bring this up? This is an example where the technical coordination is clearly laid out in the document, and if we don't do this well, there is potential for systemic failure. We have had extensive community consultations on the draft RIR governance document so far, and if you're interested or curious to know what is going on, I encourage you to take a look at this document as well, because it concerns the fundamental governance of the RIRs. Another example that I want to give of coordination within the technical community is the Technical Community Coalition on Multi-Stakeholderism, or TCCM. I think I've spoken about the TCCM across several other panels, but I think again, it's good to just talk about it, because I think their work is very relevant to us as we're talking about internet fragmentation. The TCCM is where technical operators of the internet gather to discuss core policy issues, and we started our work during the GDC and are now continuing on into the WSIS Plus 20 review process. It's a different kind of capacity building. It's not so much about technical coordination as such, but it is a form of policy coordination amongst the technical operators, and I think it is a much needed one. We're fighting internet fragmentation by building bridges between the technical and the non-technical realms. Now, I wanted to address a remark made by Michelle, and I'm so thankful that you brought this up, regarding the severe cuts in funding and how that has affected a lot of the civil society, non-governmental organizations that are doing very, very good work in trying to mitigate internet fragmentation. And I want to bring up another example where such severe funding cuts have affected especially the Pacific community. It's, to me, not just a vacuum of influence in a time of strained geopolitical tensions, but more importantly, such severe funding cuts have really hampered the Pacific community, which is far away enough from everyone, in their internet development efforts, and having them, be able to access the internet. And so this, to me, is a really important topic. I hope that we could perhaps have a little discussion around that. And so, just in summary, I think the PNIF is in a great position to continue this work on internet fragmentation and to develop recommendations for GDC implementation, because we have not really seen much work in this area as to do with the implementation itself. I think it's also crucial that the PNIF includes your voice in the WSIS Plus 20 review process. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. And reminding that of the high-level event in less than 10 days now, right? And hoping to see a lot of us in Geneva as well, discussing some of the same topics and some of the same need for coordination and so on. I think now we open for questions from the audience, right? So I'm not sure how do we do with the microphones, but we should have one here. And if folks would like to make a question, feel free to just jump into the queue. Do we have a microphone?
There's a mic.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Vinicius Fortuna. I work at Google. I'm the engineering lead for our internet freedom effort. And I just wanted to highlight that on the topic of digital sovereignty, it's almost like incompatible with internet as a whole, because they don't depend on other people anymore, right? So like, why would you keep communicating I think really the key here is the interdependency. So we need to make sure that we highlight the need for this interdependency, like what are the benefits, and demonstrate that it's like more effective. You can be more efficient by depending on others. You see examples like China, for example, like they became independent pretty much, and they don't depend on external service, so they are able to block like Google and Wikipedia and many other services because they have reproduced it internally. So it makes it really easy, and you've seen that with Iran too. And things like sanctions make it worse because it kind of like forces the country to become sovereign in a way. And so we need also like to remove the sanctions that are hurting really this and accelerating the separation of Iran. So I think this is also a reflection of a bigger trend. Like we see this polarization and distrust. I think distrust is really what's pushing countries to also distrust each other and separate. So I think there's this fundamental kind of question that needs to be addressed too.
Thank you, Vinicius.
Hi. Juan Ortiz Frauler, PhD candidate in the University of Southern California. Perhaps echoing what the previous speaker mentioned, it was interesting to see how the GDC speaks in terms of protecting against internet fragmentation without really addressing the root causes of it. And I was wondering who you think is going to be the champion of this interdependence now that the US doesn't seem to be interested in doing that. Europe, with this sovereignty agenda, perhaps isn't as interested. I think some of the companies used to be, but now that we have these big tech companies, they don't necessarily need to interoperate anymore, right? Many of them are less interested in making their services interoperable. So who is left for this agenda, or is this not something that we're going to be discussing in 2-3 years because the term fragmentation is over?
Thanks, Juan. I think we have a question from remote, but I'll give you guys the chance to answer or address it. I don't know if the remote speakers and I know Joyce is gonna address it. Go ahead. You can go ahead if you want, and then I'll check the remote. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks very much. I can't see anymore where they've gone. Okay. Thank you very much. I think you've raised very critical issues, both the gentlemen who spoke. One was on, increasing isolationism and protectionism, in an environment where there is a lot of distrust. And I think, Drew spoke so eloquently about how we are trying to build trust of the technical community to be able to continue functioning and doing our work. And I completely agree that there is a complete disconnect between this idea of digital sovereignty, which has become sort of the buzzword for a lot of nations to talk about, or rather to frame the way that they think about the internet and how they feel that citizens should use the internet. And that does rather disturb me, because a lot of the times where digital sovereignty is raised is often code word for something else, right? And I'll leave it to your imaginations what they mean when they say that. And I think that is, it goes against the idea of a borderless, internet where we celebrate permissionless innovation. And how do we sort of transmit these values from the technical community and bridge the gap of understanding from governments and nation states to understand why do we do work in this way and why is this important to us in making sure that the internet is global, it is single, it continues to be interoperable. So this is a lot of the work that we are continuing to do. And I'll use this to segue into the other gentleman who talks about, who is the champion of interdependency? It is not the technical community. I'm going to just put it right out there, right? We have spent many years talking about the values of the internet and why we have to maintain it as it is. And I think our voice is sort of dropped into a bucket of pool of water and it, where does it go, right? So my answer to you is, it's very cliche, but I think the champions are us, all of us, collectively in the multi-stakeholder community, because we amplify each other's voices. The technical community can't always be, kind of raising the banner and, we keep talking and talking about the same things with the diplomats, with the governments, but if these messages are not carried across with other stakeholder groups, it becomes difficult. We are like the sole voice, just keep talking about this. So it is the responsibility of the multi-stakeholder community. I do strongly feel that we should demonstrate why we are this multi-stakeholder community and be able to, bolster each other this way.
Thanks, Joyce. I will take the remote question, I'll take Peter's question. So I don't know who wants to read it or if it was already addressed in the chat, just double check.
Sheetal or
Yeah, Sheetal, Teresa.
Read it out.
Yeah.
So if you can go to the remote moderators.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just navigate to the question, which, okay. So the question is, most of global trade and transactions happens directly or indirectly through the internet. If there are barriers between geographies in a scenario of well-established internet barriers, do we go back to communication by post and telephones, or establish inter-regional treaties and bilateral treaties just to be able to send an email across geographies? So I suppose this is about what kind of legal regulatory solutions could we see? Is the solution in treaties or in something else, perhaps? Hopefully I've understood that and related it to you clearly.
Thanks, Sheetal. I'll take Peter's question as well, and then we can see who from our panelists would like to address them. So, Peter, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks, Bruna. This is Peter Koch. I work for DNIC, the German top-level domain registry, CCTLD. Following up on one of the previous speakers here at the microphone, and maybe also on Jen's response, somebody said that the notion of fragmentation is kind of losing a meaning. I'm wondering whether it is not the notion of internet that is confused here a bit. And maybe the panel can reflect on that a bit. I mean, this goes into the direction of the governance on and governance off. And when we were talking about the sovereignty, which is often control over content that reaches my population, where that line is, and whether there might be confusion actually what we mean, or what they mean when they say internet versus what the technical community means when we say what the internet is. Thank you.
Thank you. Any takers, commenters on the questions? Not sure, Marília, if you'd like to say something also about this, putting you on the spot, using the Brazilian privilege here.
Thank you, Bruna. I can take a couple of questions. Let me just say a few words about digital sovereignty before I move to Siva's question. I think that the association between digital sovereignty and isolationism and fragmentation is not necessarily true. One thing does not necessarily lead to the other. And if we see why discussions on digital sovereignty appeared in internet governance, they stem from the fact that we had more than a decade of liberal digital economy, which has made sure that the internet became global, which has lowered the prices of ICTs and services and brought us many benefits. But that has also brought us many flip sides, which were negative, such as the erosion of our rights online and more inequality in the context of digital economy. The promises that the digital economy would bring wealth to everybody were just not fulfilled. We had more concentration in the context of the digital economy. So in order to redress these imbalances, several countries have started to formulate requests for more autonomy to deal with trade-offs, policy trade-offs that were being created in the context of the internet. And I think that many of these requests for more autonomy and self-determination, they are legitimate. Whether they should be framed as digital sovereignty as a word or not is another story. but we ignore them for far too long. And I think that one thing does not necessarily lead to the other. We need to pay attention to countries and other actors who are formulating the need for more right and economic balance, whether this is through digital sovereignty or not. But let me go to the question of Siva, because I think it's a very interesting and provocative one. Because it is important to define fragmentation, but it's also important to try to define its flip side. So if we don't want fragmentation, what do we want to see? What is the internet that we want? Sometimes it's easier to fight for something that we want, right, than to try to defend ourselves from what we do not want to see. And I think a very good word to define this flip side is internet openness, which in the IGF has been understood as interoperability, as open standards, as flows of data packets, of content, and open governance. But openness is never a binary concept. We cannot have full closeness, we cannot have full openness. If we don't have no openness at all, the internet would collapse. And I think it's clear from different sectors that we do not want to go back to the telephone or to the telegraph, as Siva suggested. We need to have the internet because we depend on its value, economically, socially. So what are the solutions that we need to put in place in order to see an internet that does not fragment to the point in which it becomes useless to societies and to the economy? I think that a sad scenario that you mentioned, which seems more plausible than going back to the telephone, is to have regional internets. Not because there's a technical fragmentation, but because there is a market fragmentation. And this is happening already. If you live in Switzerland and you have a Huawei phone, you cannot update your phone fully anymore. I have friends who have been Huawei users for life because they just liked the phone, but they are thinking about switching. They don't have the freedom to use this hardware anymore because although it's built on an open source Android software, they cannot have updates being offered from Google anymore, and apps are not being offered to run on Huawei phones. So we are already fragmented in a way. Fragmentation from the standpoint of hardware, it has effects upstream. So we need to consider that as well when we are discussing fragmentation. And it's important to bring this aspect of how much we are fragmenting value chains to the picture.
Thank you, Marilia. I think we're seeing a lot of very concrete, right, different perspectives on the discussion, and it's very interesting that this session is diving into this because from one side you see as fragmentation, from the other side you see as sovereignty as possibly a positive thing that states might be able and might need to introduce at some point, but at the same time these sovereignty measures might result in different points and so on. But I'll hand it to Wim because I think we want to maybe dive into these more concrete aspects or concrete suggestions kind of areas, and just noting that maybe perhaps this differentiation between fragmentation and sovereignty can be one first thing that we start, or one first thing that the report this year can address. But I'll stop talking and give the floor back to you.
Thank you. As you can easily see, this is a very interesting discussion with a lot of facets, and I'm pretty sure we could fill a full IGF week just talking about internet fragmentation, hearing all views and opinions. But I would like to ask a very concrete question to each of the panelists, also the online panelists and the audience. Like I said, we work as intersessional activity usually we work in the months before the IGF, then the IGF is our endpoint. This year, it's thanks to the different scheduling, we have the opportunity to kick off most our work at the IGF with an interesting discussion and then work in the months after the IGF. The aim is that we have our report ready by the 1st of November. So a concrete question to each of the panelists, also the audience, for me is, what can we do? If you have one short discussion from this is something you can do in the next months and report on by the 1st of November, and this would be helpful for the discussion. So maybe let's start with Joyce.
They can also be hot takes if you want. So
I think moving forward, it might be useful for the PNIF to really look at some of the initiatives that have already begun or might be beginning that would address issues that are related to internet fragmentation. I think it would be quite hard to find specific initiatives that are tackling exactly the topic of internet fragmentation, but there is a lot of work that is going on around it, and I have already pointed out several of this sort of coordination that's happening. So if the report could perhaps put in some of the efforts that are already being done, I think that would really enrich your report.
Okay, thank you.
Before I see what next, I would just short mention that, especially coming from the government, what fragmentation means. One element that I didn't mention, that it affects totally transparency and justice system. So if we want strong institutions, we have to stop and really talk more about this, and especially supporting, because in my country and region we support a lot of startups. So if we want to continue supporting startups on digital network, we should talk about this. So what next? I think that we really, starting from the political level and more operational, should start working on gaps. I think that there are not too much gaps, but gaps exist. And of course, support more capacity building, but in local level. So people in local level understand how fragmentation can affect their everyday work, especially in digital plan. And of course, at the end, PNIF just continues its work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what should we start to work on Monday?
Yes, from my point of view, I think what would be nice to also include, explain a little bit more what is the risk of internet fragmentation from the technical layer aspects, because especially when we see, as you said, it's such a broad term, that's why we came up with the framework, but the risk at the technical layer is, in my mind, is the highest, at least from where I sit. And that would have, I feel, the biggest impact. But that's not very clear to the other folks. Maybe the technical community understands this, but maybe we haven't articulated that well. So I hope that via this PNIF report, we can make that more clear, that why does the technical community at the technical layer focuses on fragmentation at that level so much, that why when the laws comes in and why sometimes they ask for conflicting things for the internet architecture itself, because it's not like the various governments have the same philosophies, they don't have the same requirement, but we have one internet, and we have to make sure that it remains one internet. And for that point, we need to articulate a little bit more better, and I hope we can partner on that and do something on this aspect.
Thank you. Let's move to the online panelists. Maria?
Thank you, Ben. I think that listening to discussions today, it becomes clear how the palette of topics that are encompassed under fragmentation are very diverse. And I think that this may be a little bit paralyzing. If I were to suggest something to the policy network, would be to prioritize which type of fragmentation the network wants to tackle in terms of topic in each work cycle. And the GDC talks about risks. I think this is a very important word. Perhaps it would be time to consult the IGF community with, I don't know, a questionnaire or something that they can reply to. Today, looking at the state of the world, which are the main risks being brought by fragmentation? Is it technical? Is it commercial? Is it censorship? And to focus on the work cycle on these particular risks. I think it would be easier like this to bring actors together, to identify them, and to have a discussion that becomes more focused and constructive, in which we can have concrete outcomes.
Thank you. And Michel, last, give us some concrete work to do.
Well, last word, I would say that we often oppose sovereignty and fragmentation. Maybe my own definition here, in Canada, where I'm from, people are a lot of talking about being sovereign. And being sovereign over the internet is completely technical. They would like that, our country depends less on other countries for its own infrastructure or its own data, for them to be, more controlled by us. So this is okay, and this is sovereignty. Now, fragmentation is totally political. Of course, we use the technical layer to make it happen, but it's totally political. Somebody somewhere decide that some user does not have access to some content. We need to understand that, and that discussion needs to be at a political level to make it not happening anymore.
Okay, thank you. Looking also at the audience, I would like to say, if you have ideas, very practical ideas of what we as Policy Network should do, I would recommend two things. First of all, subscribe to the mailing list of the Policy Network. You'll find details on the website. The second thing, if you have ideas, please contact me, please contact Bruna, Sheetal, or Teresa. We didn't hear her, but she was following our MAC co-facilitator. Just with ideas, we will be more than happy to hear. I see we have 4 minutes left, and I would like to go back to Sheetal, who has been following, taking notes, and will make a wrap-up of today's session. Back to you, Sheetal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rim. I want to attempt to summarize the different areas of discussion by looking at 3 areas where I found there was some confluence, and it was interesting to hear all of the different perspectives to some extent coalesce around problems that we see when it comes to addressing internet fragmentation, examples of some good practice, and then recommendations, which you just ended on there by asking everyone for their recommendations for the PNIF. So those 3 areas, if we start with the problems that you discussed, we also obviously heard from remote and in-person participants on this. Some of the problems that were brought up were included still a lack of common understanding or the use of different terminologies when we're talking about this issue, but also increasing attempts at territorialization and the use of sovereignty concepts that have been really about strengthening the state itself, the entanglement of economic and national security, and the political normalization of network control. There was a discussion of the need to address that perhaps by bringing in discussions of or knowledge of the broader digital political economy. And so another problem, perhaps connected to that, is the disconnect between regulators and the technical community, a lack of understanding, perhaps between the different communities, misalignment and breakdown of coordination and cooperation between different stakeholder communities. Is also referenced, linking to that. There was also a lack of funding for actors who are working to address internet fragmentation and digital repression and distrust between different countries and communities. So considering all of that, there were also examples of good practice to address such problems. We heard about in Montenegro working to promote economic and political arrangements that align with the broader EU frameworks. We heard about, with the IAB, the development, of course, of global standards that promote interoperable data flows. We heard about the work of civil society and others to address digital repression by developing technical open source solutions. We heard about the RIR governance document, which is a really concrete example of setting out how cooperation can happen, what expectations are. And we heard about the Technical Community Coalition for Multi-Stakeholderism, which is an example of coordination and information sharing. So to end on recommendations and where we're going to launch the PNIF work, really, and invite you to continue to be part of this discussion. I think it was Joyce who mentioned that the IGF is a confidence and capacity building space, and so we want to continue to use that. There was recommendations that we develop more collaboration between the technical community and regulators and other stakeholders, so that there's increased understanding of the impacts of regulation on the globality of the internet. It was suggested we consider discussion and connections to the political economy. So these discussions are not happening in a vacuum, but the broader trends there, mobilize companies perhaps as part of that. Perhaps we should focus in on a few risks to the global internet, identify other examples of successful coordination. So we had the TCCM, but other ones perhaps, that we seek ways to support actors and increase resourcing for addressing or figure out recommendations for increasing resourcing for addressing network control. that we engage with the WSIS plus 20 process and perhaps develop implementation recommendations for that cooperation commitment in the Global Digital Compact. So that, I'm just going to hand back to you now, and ending with that call for everyone to remain engaged in this discussion. We had so many recommendations there coming at the end about what we can practically do, and I look forward to working with you all together on taking those forward. Back to you, Wim.
Chantal. Perfect timing, as we were saying. I'm going to wrap up. We just saw a time up come on the screen. So I would like to thank everyone for attending this session, thank our panelists for this incredible discussion. And this is just the 20th IGF. We hope there's 1,000 more. And we do look forward to continue engaging with you all with the PNIF perspective, but also as part of the IGF community. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.